Now, one more thing also, I just realized I forgot to mention the second part about one thing that I was going on about. I didn't conclude the thought. The example of Sarah in that particular situation, where she was with me for a year. She was learning all the things, not just from me, but from watching videos, and then having me tell her all the interconnections of the meanings and the inferences from those videos. So like I said, the example of the super retarded kid who would not even understand 5th grade level math, they can't understand it because their inference generating mechanisms, which are created by the interconnections between your neuronal sets, those aren't working correctly. That's what makes a person what we call dense or uninsightful. Okay, so you could show the tables in front of them all day long, they won't extract the meaning from those tables. So true knowing and intelligence capacity is the ability to inference stack correctly, what I call inference stacking. Now there's a beautiful scene from the movie Limitless, which I've referred to multiple times, particularly in other playlists, I think, outside of this one, where after he took that pill, he was sitting in the back seat of a limo with Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro turns to him, gives him a binder. To the Limitless guy, he says, "Hey, what do you think about these companies here? At face value, it seems like, hey, I want you to take a look at these companies I have selected that I've placed into this binder here, just for the purpose of having you evaluate what the company prospects are." Okay? Obviously, this was not what was really going on. But Limitless Man's, Eddie Mora's, higher, what we could call central coherence, which is the lack of context blindness when you have perfect central coherence, perfect neuronal interfunctioning. That's highest, like super quasi-God level intelligence. So you could watch them on the screen. They did the scene very well, because that's actually how it is when you have real heightened intelligence and awareness. It's just like that. Whoever the fuck was writing the script for that movie really knew what the fuck and how to depict it. There's a lot of scenes in that movie too that had very highly relevant things. It's actually beyond bizarre how many very subtle specific things they knew. So they knew more than one would think they ought to know if it were completely fictional. It's really something. But anyway, in that movie, you see him going through the binder, and he'll have like 5 eureka moments in a row, chained one after another. You'll see him flipping through the sheets. At first, he's like flipping through the sheets. He's like, like flip 1, flip 2, okay. Then he goes, oh, well, no, hold on, this wouldn't really, oh, no, it's not really these companies you want to know about, but, oh, no way, wait a minute, it's, oh, you're trying to make a merger happen with that other company. And the guy who gave him the binder is like, what the fuck? How does he know that? And he's like, but wait, it won't go. Oh, you're trying to make the deal with Iran. Oh, no, but here's the thing. Oh, but here's the missing link. And then in 5 quick chains, Eddie Mora was able to more highly inference stack to correctly have a higher position of awareness than even the one who gave him the binder, who had originally who he knew what he was doing, except that the one who could have a higher vision would see better, clearer, and more quickly. This is a lot like what it is, kids. Folks, let me tell you, it's just like that. If you gave the same binder to anyone else, they would stare at it for 10 years without reaching any of the subsequent 3rd, 4th, and 5th tier inference levels. It's almost outside the realm of humanity, unless you're super intelligent. Maybe some of the smartest among us could do like 1 inference stack. And in this movie, they show him like chain 4. It's like, holy hell, how did you know that? Are you spying on me? No, it's just obvious from what you're doing when you gave it to me. It is in fact obvious, except mammalian brains are limited, except when you upregulate the mammalian brains. So this is what we did with Sarah. After a year of this stuff, we gave her some of the power and the research chemicals. She was nervous, but she tried it. Then she goes back to doing the usual. She just cozied up, okay. You know, she put on her, she put on the blanket, because we only wore blankets in the house. And she was wearing the blanket, and she went to the bed and stayed wrapped in her blanket and started watching conspiracy videos. But here's the interesting thing. We had the same general type of show turned on, the same person talking the same kind of stuff that we've been listening to for a year, except this time you could see the deeper, higher quantum mechanisms of intelligence turning behind her eyes, where now that she's on the super pills for the first time ever, she's interpreting the deeper meaning behind it, such that, let's say where for the whole time I could have been putting 5th grade math in front of her and she would be getting 5th grade level inferences, just barely so, and kind of sort of keeping up sort of ish. Now it's like all of a sudden you could put calculus in front of her and she would get the implications about the calculus that even you, the teacher, wouldn't have dreamed of your regular teacher who just gave her that. And she'd be like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, I see, wait a minute. Oh. And she quantum leaped like 4 inference stacks in a row. I noticed it because I'm super god with the inference stacks. You know, I don't want to say that. That's a little too much. But you understand, very highly sophisticated in that way, so I could see it when it's happening in another person very easily. I saw it happening to her for the first time ever. And as she was listening, I watched her do new things that she wouldn't do beforehand. Before she was just passively, whoa. Now it was like, wait a minute, if he's saying this about that and that and the other thing and that, then could it be true that this is about that? I'm like, smart one. And she's like, yes, let me go Google that now. And I'd watch her like multi-tab, open screens, go to know where to go for the information. I was like, oh my God, this shit is working on her too. She's like, oh my God, cross-linking, checking the cross information. That validates this and that, and in 12 minutes, she got more of a broadening and massive loading of her understanding of what was going on than in 6 months cumulative total prior. And I was like, yup, this shit wins again. Mind power. She was like, wow. And I was like, do you feel smarter? She's like, yeah. I was like, you've been listening and saying the same stuff for a year, right? She's like, yeah, but it's so funny because now I feel like it's so obvious. I'm like, yeah. She was like, before he was saying it, but it wasn't obvious. And I was like, yeah, but not because it's not true, but because your capacity for it changed. She's like, yes, for sure. There you go. She's like, oh, John, you were right. You see, kids. So here's how this stuff works. You could have the highest scientists in the world come bring me into their courses that they spent 5 years to get to where they are. I'll come in as a newcomer. At the moment at starting at go, they'll know more than me about some of the inner facts about stuff. But with my higher density interconnective tissue, all that, within 45 minutes of going through their materials, because I can inference stack at exponentially higher rates than regular humans do, but correctly, I'll reach higher conclusions, correct conclusions. I'll quantum leap hyper race over them, that I'll be smarter than the ones that studied for 5 years when I study for an hour and a half. I'll I'll outpace them. You get it? I can read a few case decisions for a few days, and from that, the hyper cross links, I'm smarter than most judges living on the planet today. Do you get it now? You people had better pay very, very close attention to anything and everything that flows from my mouth. Everything. The whole world will be hanging in anticipation of what I will say next. For it will carry that much of validity and meaning. And turning now to the doctrine of unclean hands, often referred to as the dirty hands doctrine or the unclean hands doctrine. It is a legal code that allows a court or a group of people or any proceeding or matter or whatever's going on to refuse to hear a case or an issue or claim if the party bringing up the claim has themselves committed a wrongful act within that chain. The principle of clean hands has its roots in Roman law. It finds expression in maxims of Roman law. This maxim underwrites all the rest, in that if we expect to have equity in our lives, we must come clean and not expect rewards based on hidden agendas or underlying fraud or denial of responsibility. The inherent and substantive nature of equitable rights is that they're fair, they're just, they're equal, and they're balanced. If we want a stable world and a just world, we must come into it with clean hands. Therefore, this is a requirement in the law. This requires true self-honesty, to take responsibility for our mistakes, our transgressions, and our participation in the wrongs of this world, particularly those wrongs that affect us, that we are involved with in a circular manner. If you had anything to do with it, you cannot make a claim later. You're blocked.
Unclean hands is a doctrine that's going to prevent you from securing a right that you would otherwise have because you've contributed to the wrong that you're actually claiming someone else did. You're involved in it.
The law, there is this term of art, and it's called having unclean hands. And what that means is that when you are involved in court litigation, if you have unclean hands, that you've either done something to violate a law or violate an agreement or violate a rule. And oftentimes, when somebody who has unclean hands or dirty hands is asking for a certain type of relief from the court, if the court sees that that person has unclean hands, the court may not be inclined to grant the relief because they say that person has unclean hands.
Okay, picking back up, this is the following day. I've been recording yesterday. Let's resume the points. We had just introduced the concept now of the doctrine of unclean hands. This is very important. It's also the case that, it's very funny, it seems basic, it seems very intuitive. Truly, it is intuitive. However, there's a funny thing that happens, that when actual people get into real conflicts with one another, the people who are the wrongdoers in the situation will instinctively forget the doctrine of unclean hands and that principle when they start yelling and making accusations at each other. So what does this mean? Let's take an example. Let's say I'm riding my bike down the street, and then I steer into you accidentally, and I hit you. I say, maybe you could say accidentally, or maybe we could say recklessly. You know, there's a little bit of a difference between negligence and recklessness. So let's say I recklessly bumped into you because I was just being a dumbass or trying to make some kind of trick with my bike and not look where I was going, and it's not very funny, and I ended up kind of hitting someone a little bit, and they got, you know, pushed to the side a little bit, and some woman, and she's very upset. She says, "Oh, what is wrong with you, you asshole? You hit me on the bike." Okay, and then let's say, you know, where I'm supposed to apologize for doing that. Let's say I don't apologize. Let's say I'm some stupid teenager who's not really so interested in apologizing. So I'm just gonna say, yeah, whatever, lady. All right, don't worry about it, lady. Okay. All right. Now this lady, extremely angry, comes up to me and rips my bag open, and takes all the stuff in my bag and throws it to the ground and starts stomping on my things and pushes my bike over onto the ground and starts sticking her finger in my face and cursing at me and calling me a lot of names. Okay? Like all the worst names and terrible insults that if you were to say that normally to anyone in the street, they would call that offensive. Okay? Okay, we understand the story? Good. How many wrong things happen in this story? Okay, number one, I recklessly hit this woman with a bike. Okay. And number two, which is even worse, when she gave the initial rebuke, I failed to make repentance. Instead, I declined and didn't hear her, and I only just disrespected her even more, essentially. That's two wrongs, okay? Now, if you keep counting the amount of wrongs that took place, would you be able to count it as an undefensible or unjustifiable wrong? That the woman in turn flipped out in anger and started jumping on my things, pointing at me and calling me the worst names you can imagine? If I went to our neighbors afterwards and said, "Hey, you know what? That lady Sally, she knocked my bike over. She was yelling many things at me. Very bad, Sally, very bad. Sally is bad, right?" No, he's not. You cannot make a claim if you are trying to approach equity or obtain equity while you have unclean hands. I was the one who committed an offense against her first, and it was such a significant offense that naturally, by the scope and level of the offense, I created the risk through my own actions that invited her anger naturally to come in and become manifest. Now, it's true, not every person in the world would have become angry, but the reasonable risk was there that she stood to become angry, and in this circumstance she happened to manifest the anger and meet that possibility, and it happened. Okay? Where that happened, it's a quote unquote, it's wrong on the superficial level, but at equity I can't claim against her. I'm barred. I'm blocked. So no human being on earth will ever stand there and agree with me and say, "Yeah, Sally was wrong for knocking your bike over and pointing her finger in your face and yelling at you real hard." Oh no, folks. No, she wasn't wrong. She was angry, out of control, because I drove her there, so I can't make a claim against her that she disrespected me when I'm the reason that she went there. She was brought there by my effects, by my causing that effect. You understand that? So I cannot speak out of both sides of my mouth. I can't, from the one side, operate evilly, and then on the other side, make a claim when you react to my evil in a bad way. Do you get it now? Because when I did the wrong against her, equitably, I got a punch back, metaphorically speaking. Well, Hammurabi and Moses both said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. It's equitable. It's not perfect, But I waive my right to a claim when I did the wrong thing first. Let me repeat that again. I waive my claim when I did the wrong thing first. If I was riding my bike in the street and I didn't hit her and I stopped next to her and then she knocked me down, stomped on my bag and on my things and pointed her finger in my face and yelled at me, then that would be wrong and I could have a claim, and it wouldn't be the case that her actions are defensible in that case. Do you understand the difference? That is everything. But you know what I see in life everywhere you go? This is an obvious principle, and yet how many times especially I have seen this, and who's the most guilty of this? Sorry to say, women. Women have this malfunctioning program where they will always try to play this game. It's very common. Men will not do it, or it's very rare for men to do it because we understand the principles. But women don't, they're not programmed the same way, so they'll try to run away with evil and make you buy their frame. We'll never buy it, but they always try anyway. So it's our job as men to stop it and not recognize it, because it's sick. They will do the evil thing first. We will warn them. They will continue in their evil. Then we are brought to react, and then they try to hold us guilty for the reaction. Not in equity, you can't, because you were responsible for creating the risk that invited the thing. Therefore, you abandoned the right and power to make a claim against us. That's the correct equitable law. Do you understand this? This, as a standalone principle, operates everywhere in life. And when you have unclean hands, this effectively bars you, or it otherwise makes what would have been a wrong on my part completely defensible and justifiable, either completely or most of the way. Where if there's some residual impact of offense, it would be demunitized to such a minimal extent that it would not compare. And by the way, furthermore, here's another trick that women typically will do. Not only they'll try to hold you guilty for your reaction, but then on top of that, they will act as if your reaction, for them, it canceled out the wrong that they originally did. So it's a two-part trick. It's a double-pronged sickness, where they try to hit two birds with one stone. They don't even realize they're doing it. They're just operating from the auto-evil instinct that they got from Eve, so to speak, karmically speaking. They don't get it. So we have to teach them to get it and to operate within man's law. That's why it says men run the world. Why? Because masculine law is God's law on the world. God's law is a masculine entity, not a feminine entity. But it requires that we run the law on earth by masculine power. So whenever you turn to women to let them run it by their feelings, the world burns. Soon enough. You can't have it. It's not a structure that's meant to last. So, yeah, oftentimes, you know, imagine if I hit that woman with the bike and then she knocked me over, hit me, pointed at me. Could I then go to my friends and say, oh, not only was Sally bad because she pointed her finger at me, but that made it that I'm not bad for having hit her? No. Number one, I am wrong for hitting her. Number two, she's not wrong, either 100% not wrong or 98% of the debt is cleared, and 2% she's wrong, but I can't claim it. So it's like kind of between her and God, so to speak, that she did that. I can't raise it against her. That's the key element. Never forget this. I want to turn to a second principle or concept of law, which is also extremely important. Now, court, the word court doesn't mean a government structure. It means a court is any gathering or a group of people for a designated function or purpose. Okay? It's very important. So when it said that a man and a woman are dating each other, in the Old English it said they're courting. Why are they courting? Because they're coming together for a purpose. All right, so that's called courting. Back in the day, when a king had his in his palace, the king had his group of people that would hang around him, his posse, his gang, his group. You know, outside of his family, you know, you had like the chief magistrates and the guards and the people at the head officers and roles and things like that. Collectively, the group that they formed, was called the what? The court, the king's court. It didn't even necessarily mean that they were like judges. That's not what it is. A court just means the group of people who are carrying out a function as a group. The king's court. Nothing to do with judges, although the king happens to be a judge too. But just people being together for a purpose as a court. When two people in society are having a conflict or controversy between each other, such that there's an argument and there's a debate over rights and about who's right and who's wrong, it can be said that whenever those two people remain in disagreement and now other people have to become involved in order to mediate the resolution of that matter, the substantive thing or element that they form collectively is a court, a substantive court of sorts. Okay, so don't get too attached to the meanings of to the form of words, what you think they mean, but there's a substantive meaning that binds it all correctly. Now, when it comes to conflicts such as this, because interpersonal conflicts are as old as mankind itself is and even older, are conflicts between two living organisms or entities or beings. And one feels that one is right, the other feels that the other is right, so they will battle on the merits to see who really is right. Okay? Whenever you have, and now this is assuming that we're dealing with sovereigns. This is the other important part of the equation. So typically, if people originate from parts of the world where sovereignty was not a key element in their metaphysical, spiritual, legal, all bind and linked together history, they don't know the concepts. It's not in their cultural programming, their genetic memory. That's kind of fuzzy. All right, but take it from the kind of Anglo-American sphere, we can say that perhaps in our sphere of law, the most of all, as a extension of what was Roman law and Greek law back then, and Judeo-Christian law also. All these principles tie in together. They're almost all perfectly consistent with one another, and they outline the basis of how to run things properly, equitably, by the merits. So here's what happens. Two people get into a conflict. Now, in order to mediate the conflict correctly, there's a very key element that needs to happen. Both sides need to be able to speak. Okay? This is a very important foundational principle. If one side is barred from the opportunity to speak, there cannot be established true facts at law. Because remember, if you sue somebody, you make a claim, it's a sworn claim, but just because you claimed it doesn't make it a fact. It becomes a fact when the other party had an opportunity to answer because you served them the complaint. They sat there with the papers and either they chose not to answer, which meant that they defaulted to your accusations and tacitly agreed that they're true, so now they're true because we got the consent from both parties that they're true. Or if they argue it, they respond with an answer. They will either admit it or deny it. And then if they deny it, guess what? It doesn't matter that you swore it's true, because if they swore that it's not true in their counter to you, their reply, which was a denial. By the way, now one of you are lying, so there's another issue. Kind of the beautiful thing about law is you're not allowed to make a lie when you swear. So if we have one person swearing one fact by personal knowledge and another person swearing a denial, for sure, you guys are collectively, someone's in dishonor. If we were God and we knew which one of you is speaking improperly, for sure, every single person who ever brought a lawsuit that resulted in a denial to a complaint, somebody's lying or misspeaking. They would go to jail if we had God-level power to know who's the one who's lying or misspeaking. We don't do that if we don't know. But already we see these are debtors. These are not creditors spiritually. These are debtors. Well, at least one of them. Now I have to go to court because two people are swearing opposite things. It's very sick. Okay? But regardless, if you don't give someone the opportunity to speak, You don't have facts because when one party speaks and then it's only one side's story that you understand or hear, that's not a fact. That's called hearsay. Remember, only non-hearsay can be admissible as true evidence or true fact in life. Okay, that's indicative of a real truth. So this turns to the next issue. Therefore, whenever you form a court around either around a group of people or with a group of people for the purpose of resolving a conflict that has arisen between two people who are at least one of whom are debtors and they're in conflict or controversy with each other, the first thing that must be guaranteed is the unrestricted right to speak. The unrestricted right to express your speech. Keep this in mind, hold that in your mind as we turn now to another counter concept in law and in life. We all know the concept of defamation. When you defame someone or slander them or engage in gossip about them that's not merited for you to be engaging in, you don't have the jurisdiction to talk like that about someone. This is called speech that defames a person's character, damages or injures a person's reputation by us making speech that represents the person's character as being faulty or defective. Okay? When such speech is not defensible, that is called defamation. Defamation is contrary to law. So if you defame someone, you can even get sued. If there's damages, the person who was defamed has right to come into money awards if it's the case that they resulted in money damages that you could strictly prove, which is not usually the case. But anyway, so we have two kind of contradictory concepts. We have generally in life, you're not allowed to recklessly or maliciously speak bad about people's character when you lack cause to do so. Okay? And then on the other hand, returning to what we just said a moment ago, when people are in direct conflict with each other, both parties, as a principle of law, must be allowed to have full and unrestricted speech. Oh, okay. So generally, outside of a controversy, you can't slander people's character. But in a controversy, you're like God. You have to be able to say anything you possibly could be able to. Now, these two concepts are at odds with one another. So when all the long-haired, bearded men of all the ancient pasts came together and understood, well, which one of these dominates? Which one of these is the controlling factor or element? Is it the case that, well, defamation is bad, therefore we can never defame anyone? So therefore, when we bring two people into a controversy with one another and they're litigating arguments against one another in a quote-unquote informal or substantive court, quote-unquote, setting, which just means a group of people who are there to argue about the things and debate. It's just a debate. A court is a debate setting. So mock trial is held in a mock court. That could be your classroom in high school. You understand? Is it the case that when I say that such litigants who are defending themselves and putting forward their case as to why they're right and someone else is wrong, they are guaranteed the free speech, except if there's something defamatory, then they have to stop, then it's not really free speech? Or is the principle of law such that the freedom of speech is even for things that would otherwise be defamatory, therefore you truly have real, free, and full, complete, total free speech, and defamation restrictions only apply outside of a moral litigation, moral controversy, moral argument, fight between one or two people, whether it's inside a court or outside of a court? Well, we have the answer for you right here, students. Let's go find it. Here we have all right, this is either I was observing one of the oldest constitutions in existence, older than the U.S. Constitution. It's the Constitution of a particular state of Massachusetts, but I think this is the real Constitution itself. Article 6, Clause 1. Here's the important thing to see here. In the Constitution, see, these old bearded men didn't just come up with random things. They used and applied correct principles of law, which you need high-level GABA B in order to intuit, and then you apply it in the realm so that you preserve order. This is very important. So when these old bearded men are preserving order, actually, funny, they're not old. If you look at history, all those founding fathers, you know, Madison and Jefferson and all those guys, you know, on and on the names go. You look at their average age at the time of all this stuff when they were signing these documents. You know what their ages were? 26, 28, 30, 31, 32. Wow. That's crazy too, right? Not so old by our standards. But funny enough, back then, those were considered old men because half of people died by 35. So anyway, here's the important thing to understand. Now, these guys are establishing the particular modes of government. Now, we have three branches. The executive, the judicial, and of course, the one branch that is that are the agents of us people, ourselves, the people themselves. That's the legislature. The legislature is the only one that is us, ourselves. That's we. Our agents are in there. They represent us. Judicial works for us. Executive is also a nominee of from our midst that we choose to lead, quote unquote, us in a sense, in a limited capacity, but who we are within that triumvirate dynamic, we are the legislator. So when we pass laws, it's as if you signed it, or you picked your agent to represent you on your behalf in that chamber to sign it for you. But it bears the same weight and effect as if you yourself personally as a citizen signed it. All right? Very wild stuff. Everybody should know their law too. Mind you, when they're setting up the fundamental principles on how these things operate, they say that it is guaranteed as a principle of correct debate, because in the legislative chambers, you will have debates that are championing different causes, very similar to how two people in an argument in the street will be having a debate where people come in, they're mediating. It's the same thing. In both cases, there's a substantive court that is formed around those respective debaters, and the ones debating therefore come into possession of certain guaranteed privileges as a matter of equitable law and principle and maxim. Okay? What are those principles? Well, they enshrined it into formal law. They said, guys, senators and representatives, that is your legislatures, your agents, they shall, read carefully, your agents, which means you, so you and the classes of all people that are entered into debate, this carries not only in the legislative branch, but in the judicial branch too, as we'll see soon, because it's all the same thing. In all cases, except extremely serious stuff where it's a high crime or a crime against the country itself, you're treasonous or some crazy thing like that, or you're breaking peace, okay, with like violence or something or whatever else. And otherwise, if you're simply speaking, you are privileged not only from arrest. So if you conduct yourself for a regular level crime, it would otherwise be a crime. When you're conducting it in funny enough, in Congress, it's not a crime. Why? Because the more important balance is that it's more important for that person to be able to act and speak for truly freely like a sovereign king is more valuable, that you are given almost free and unrestricted right to be a sovereign king in your expression for the purpose of finding real truth, than it is for you to half speak freely but half be constrained, so that you're respecting the smaller, littler limitations, but through that the real course of truth becomes compromised in the greater picture. That is what's not allowed. Okay? So now to not only for arrest, but here we go in the real context. Follow again on the screen. The senators and representatives, the legislatures, that is equals you, shall in all cases be privileged You shall be privileged for any speech or debate. You shall be privileged for any speech, any debate, and you shall not be questioned in any other place ever. Which means no one can hold you to answer as if you are guilty of something. You are immune. You are immune. People who enter into controversy such that they are obtain the privileges and rights that are inherited to them naturally to defend their cause in free debate, you obtain the equitable right to become immune from being blocked or curtailed from truly free speech. What is the practical version of that when you translate into the judicial setting and you're in a real judicial court proceeding? What is that called? Let's see. No question, guys. It's called litigation privilege. Guess what? Normally, if you're walking in the street, you're not directly involved in a conflict with someone or a controversy, but just because you have some dumbass opinion about someone where you don't really know any better, and you're going to say something against their character. You're going to say that that person is violent. Ugh. Well, let's say it's not actually true that they're violent, and it's false. Guess what? You've just defamed their character. You may be liable. Karmically, you are liable at that point by the principle, the energetic principles of law, the energetic karma of justice. You have incurred a debt of sin there by recklessly saying that someone's violent when technically nothing that they did actually reasonably constitutes violent conduct. Therefore, you can't say that they're violent whenever you want. That's wrong. Okay? So that would be defamation for sure. But what is not defamation? Well, if you are engaged in a direct controversy in someone else, where substantive group of people is formed between you two, now there's a mediator, now there's a right for both people to express themselves, not just at each other, but within a larger setting where there's at least a mediator and possibly a greater general public who's witness to these things. Each of the two people takes on a certain privilege. What is that privilege? It's the same one I just showed you that the Founding Fathers enshrined for the legislatures. It's not just a privilege for the legislators. It's a privilege for all branches, but that goes without saying. That privilege would have existed as a common law principle, regardless of whether or not they enshrined it in form. This is what's very important to understand. We have the same moral privilege every day. When someone enters into argument with you, you have a right. Oh wait, what right is it? Do they have the right to be free from defamation, or do you have the right to express yourself freely like a god king on earth? It's the second. It's the second. That's why it's understood and recognized all through the centuries. Quote, litigation is a type of immunity given for acts and statements that are made in connection with the pursuit of litigation. So if in the street, unconnected with a live controversy, some person says something, maybe that could be defamatory, but guess what? If we enter into a controversy now, and there's a group of people formed around us, and we're volleying back and forth with a real debate, whether or not this is in a formal court, or whether it's a substantive court made up of private individuals for a purpose of quote-unquote litigating and debating between back and forth, the party who is speaking, that is in a real civil action or whatever, the attorneys and parties in the lawsuit, or in a substantive private thing, the two parties that are involved in the argument that's going on in the lives of these people, they are protected from being held as defamatory action or being held as something is wrong. They're not wrong. Why? I'll repeat again what I said. It is more in the interest of justice that a statement is made that is revelatory about the underlying character of the person we're dealing with. It doesn't matter that it may be defamatory, because it's more important that for the purposes of the course of the debate or litigation or proceeding, that the statement is made. It is better for the interest of justice and truth that I say the harmful-ish thing, because in that setting, there's two principles. Number one is more important than we understand whether someone does have a defective character. It should be said, so it must be allowed to be said. And the party can never be constrained from freely speaking. That's worse. So therefore, you're always allowed to speak. No one is allowed to come back against you when you're in an argument back and forth. But they say, oh, you're slandering me. It's a smear campaign. No, no, no. Not when you have entered. You gave the party jurisdiction to bring your character into question when you did the offense that gave the victim and the court that formed around you, both of those two, the jurisdiction to litigate and debate with you about whether or not you truly did something wrong. Once that door is open, you don't have, you lose the legal right or the moral right to claim that somebody said something about you that's harmful. Learn, you stupid idiots, you stupid little ducks and cows. You never even knew what the fuck it is. I knew from the beginning. You're always walking into my traps because you think you know something. It's so funny. I told you before, every time you think you know something, I just laugh. I keep teaching you. You stupid donkeys keep getting humbled. It's so funny, and then you'll come back again later with a new idea. Take your ideas. I have a place you can wipe them. Funny little mammals with their stupid donkey ideas. Stop it. When God tells you what the hell the principle is, fall and fucking that's all you are, puddles. Fuck. So here it is, checkmate again for the millionth time. So pathetic, you idiots. Stop even trying. Fucking melt into puddles and relax. Obviously, it's a timeless principle of law that when I say you're a narcissist, because we're already in debate, you're blocked from being able to claim that I said something negative about you. See? I knew that already, but you didn't, so you're stupid. That's why you keep walking into it, you morons. So here, the lesson of the day is, I could say anything I want about you when you're dumb enough to give me the jurisdiction to come into the fault that you created by the offense you levied against me improperly. You get it? Always many steps ahead of you, you following blind people. Figure it out. So, truly, it's ridiculous almost. Stop thinking you have an upper hand where each time you try to challenge me, I say, no, I knew 10,000 steps ago that you would have no right here, but you're blind, so you keep trying to drill into roads that don't exist, thinking you have a way there. You don't. It's very funny. Now, for the one reason is that it's more important as a principle of law that the free thing is said. So therefore the free thing shall always be stated. Number two, regardless of whether or not it is, it's also a practical situation that whenever there's a debate between two people, it wouldn't constitute defamation of character anyway, or a slander or smear campaign. Why? Well, like I just said, in true justice, both parties are given an opportunity to speak. If I'm stating something in the context of a debate or litigation back and forth where the statements of both parties as they respond to one another and as they come into full awareness of what each other has said, remember, defamation is something that's said in the absence of the party about whom you're speaking, where they don't normally find out. And in fact, they become a claimant only when they happen to come into the fact of the information that something was said. Ordinarily, you're not psychic, so you wouldn't know. Now, when people are in a debate about a moral controversy where one person did a wrong, when you do a moral or legal or criminal or civil or even really just a moral wrong, you open the jurisdiction to allow people to speak about you however it is, but with a caveat. Naturally, it's the case that you are hearing what is being said about you, therefore it's not defamation, so therefore it's no one's speech will be discouraged or limited. You have no right to then therefore come back and shame and say, oh, call me this name, call me that name, that's bad, I will not sit to meat because that's bad. No, 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 you're making up a new law that's not the real law. That's just made up Satan ideas. Not real law. It's only your feelings that made it up. Your feelings are from Satan. Did you figure that part out yet? So, if you're being brought into awareness of what the other party said through the recorded thing, where your responses about it too will also enter into the same sphere of recording, so that any greater public and our own internal proceedings and recordings about it are all keeping track of what both sides are saying back to each other, back and forth, where one person says you're a narcissist or you're violent, and the other person says, no, that's not true, or no, that's not true. Good. That's your only remedy and your full right and your free speech. So you are entitled to go, but you're not entitled to say it if it's incorrect, because that's also immoral. So don't lie, because you'll be held guilty for lying. See? But whenever you speak, you're allowed to always speak your belief if it's made in good faith. You'll never be is improper to ever have anyone come and wag a finger at you to say, oh no, can't say that, not that bad. So learn, donkeys, learn. Now, a third principle that's very important to discuss is what we could call the principle of, the principle of paying the price of waiving the protections of a given level of jurisdiction if you're dumb enough to waive them. These are also consistent with principles of equity, which tells us that, obviously if you're wronging someone and then you fail to work at that level, that they have the right to go to the next level, you don't have the right to restrict from going to the next level. Get it? So this principle is reflected kind of nicely in Matthew 18, where Christ says, over here, this is one of the most important parts of the Bible. Too few people quote it. Let's read above. But if your societal brother wrongs you, that is, any offense ever of any kind, even moral, even any indignation that's formed, that's a wronging, that's a sin, that's an offense. Because what? It causes a grudge and an offense and an indignation in the heart. That's wrong. That's energetic transgression. That's a trespass. So if he wrongs you in such a way, who's your societal brother? Anyone with whom you form society, who isn't already deemed to be in default evil, and by that probably also exiled, functionally speaking, from the community, which means they're an outsider and they no longer belong to the quote-unquote assembly that you form. But where all of society constitutes an assembly in the greater sense, and certainly within the localized communities it's a strict assembly of form, the presumption is everybody is a brother. Everyone who's related to each other, everyone who's a neighbor, everyone who lives across town from each other, but everyone's presumed to be on good terms, so you're supposed to treat each other with courtesy. Now, when you violate the courtesy and you do something wrong, the one who is wronged has an obligation. It's not only your right to reprove or rebuke the wrongdoer, actually it's an obligation, because if you fail to rebuke a wrongdoer, where a rebuke is normally merited generally, and there's only very few exceptions, and they're specific and sensible, they're specific and articulable what those exceptions are and why they would apply, it's wrong. It's actually wrong to fail to rebuke someone. Now, what's the twisted Christian principle? Anytime someone wrongs you, Jesus took care of the charges, so don't wrong. Everything's forgiven. No one's supposed to be pointing fingers at each other. No. That's Antichrist. Don't be Antichrist. Christ's actual words are shown on the screen here. This is quote from his lips himself. Get it? So don't make up stories when you have the real words from the guy himself. Reprove him between you and him alone, privately. If he hears you, that means if he repents, then good, you gained your brother back. The problem has been resolved. But if he does not hear you, imagine that. Imagine if my friend comes and curses me out to my face. And then I say, hey, don't curse me out to my face. That's not good. That's wrong. You should apologize. And they say, no, I shouldn't apologize. That's fine. Good. Now, at that moment in time, you obtain the right to go tell another person about that. When another person comes knocking on that guy's door, hey, did you curse out my friend? Do you think they're allowed to go, what? Bob, I can't believe he told you about that. Oh, that's between me and him. How could he talk bad about me? No, that's not defamation.
That's called you did an offense, so now he gets to talk about you because you waived your ability to keep the matter private by denying him the repentance that he was morally owed, that you were owing to him on account of the fact that you fucked up in the first place. So now when he goes talks about you and says he's a bad curser of people, yeah, that's not defamation. That's called, there's a controversy between you people, there's a substantive court being formed around you, and now where you will both be, statements will be taken from both of you, or opportunities will be given to collect statements, you're free to speak fully. You could call him violent, you could call him a liar, you could call him a psychopath, you could call her a narcissist. It's allowed because the principles of law say your speech shall not be restricted when someone has come and you're in controversy. If it is your prerogative both to defend yourself so viciously that you may speak freely, or to prosecute properly the wrongdoer, you're not allowed to hide the things because that guy did wrong. You must show it all and say it all. Nothing is out of bounds. Get it? We covered this already. Now, watch this. Still, there is a substantive protection from publicization, okay? However, once a witness has stepped in, at the first moment that the wrongdoer declines to work it out at the level of a witness being involved, so the witness says, I've been hearing that such and such happened. Is this right? You owe an apology. And there's not an apology immediately given? Uh-oh. Therefore it says here, if he will not hear them, tell the assembly. That means that's the first place that you're allowed to publicize the matter. So if I go tell everybody now, and they put it on YouTube, and anyone can get the YouTube link, and I start posting it all everywhere online for millions of people to see, the person who's being talked about lost the right to complain about the fact that millions of people now can hear about how they might be a narcissist on YouTube. Why? Because they waived their right to the privacy and the protection and that courtesy because they failed to admit that they're wrong. They failed to admit that they're wrong. That's what makes you get the curse back to yourselves. So obvious. So that's why justice works this way, because you have to get hurt at the end from when you made the initial hurt to someone else. When that link gets closed, and that's why it's our moral job to always facilitate the closing of that loop and that link. That's good, that's godly. The wrongdoer only will, by a snake-like modality, will say, oh, look, smear campaign. Oh, I'm not narcissist. You can't say that. Yes, we can. Because it's pursuant to a debate about what you did that was wrong. So therefore we obtain the privilege that allows us to speak freely about what you did. And if you don't believe it and say it's false, your only right is to come back to our faces and deny it and say it's false. And then the greater public, who hears both that I accused you, but that you also denied it back to me when it was accused, when you were accused of that, they get to be the judges, and they get to do so as sovereigns of themselves in their own rights. And you can't make a further claim that anything about what just happened was a additional or distinct wrong. You get it now? And to repeat one more time, you lose those protections as soon as you enter into the commission of an offense, a moral offense against someone, where you decline to agree with your adversary that you are wrong. Where you fail to agree with your adversary that you are wrong. What else does that connect to in the New Testament that Christ also said? Matthew 5:25, in the same book of Matthew, different chapter. Christ, the same guy, said the same thing again. Agree with your adversary quickly. Because if you don't, then they get a witness to talk about you with. And then if you don't agree then they get the whole public to get to talk about you with. God will not hold them guilty. They'll hold you guilty. You don't get it? You get it now? God won't punish me for calling you a narcissist. because it's not wrong once it's done in this context and setting. And Christ said exactly that. So start learning, little kids, and learn and start growing, huh? Because if you don't agree while you're in the way with him, both the figurative way and the literal way, you're out with him in the regular world, and there's a controversy between you two. You bumped into him, he bumped into you. Hey, agree, he says, because it's a sin when you don't agree. Why is it a sin? Because then they get the protections, you get talked about, you get a worse weight on you, but whose fault is it? Yours. That's why you rightly bear the debt, sin, burden, liability, responsibility. The prosecutor will deliver you to the judge delivers you to the officer, you're cast into prison, and there you'll be, and the quote continues, there you'll be made to pay every bit of, whether the literal / figurative karmic debt that you have to pay. So debtor, offensive person, wrongdoer, you inherited some liability now, haven't you? How do you get out of it? Agree. When you're wrong, you agree. When you fight and become a debtor and argue, you lose. How many times you gotta say it till these people get it? Are they so stupid or what?
And of course, it is the case that these principles of law all intertwine and correlate with each other. Each of them support each of the others. This is very important because when we look at this setup of the legal system that Christ essentially created, the Judeo-Christian system and the Greco-Roman system were joined together and created the overall greater legal system that we inherited, and that was further refined by the Anglo-American system in particular, which is, I believe, the laws at its highest form today. Is not for nothing. Keep this in mind. We covered earlier the doctrine of unclean hands. Well, no wonder that the debt and the sin accrues to the wrongdoer when he doesn't agree. Why? Because if he fails to agree because he's trying to argue that the other person did something different, or, oh no, he spoke bad about me, oh no, they did that, right, but you as the wrongdoer can't make the complaint. That's another reason why litigation privilege and the privilege for any debater in life to speak freely is a privilege, because if we're speaking about you, the wrongdoer, we already know from the doctrine of unclean hands that you already automatically lost the right to defend yourself and to raise a claim against the other person for something they supposedly did, because you did the first wrong that opened up the gate for the thing to come back to you. So that's natural and normal. That's fine. That's okay. That's protected. So you can't do wrong and then be protected by the same law which you violated first. So as soon as you violate the law, you lose the protections of the law. Do you understand? As soon as you violate the law, you lose the protections of the law. That's why there is no coming back to Anthony and going, oh, he said this about me, as if it's a separate special complaint that you get to make, one in Barbara Winslow's position. No, you don't. If it's said about you and we're in a legitimate argument back and forth where there's a multiple people involved now, so it's a substantive court that has formed now around us. No, I obtain the privilege to speak like God speaks. You don't get to complain that God said something. Exactly, because it's sovereign privilege. Same here. And very ironic, because we found at multiple points in time, this may have been already covered, you're not allowed to be a hypocrite furthermore, and you're not allowed to claim a right that you yourself have been guilty of violating the same right against someone else. This violates yet another principle of law. So let's go back in time just a little bit, just a tiny bit, and we'll recall for you guys and anyone else who might be listening Remember, it was said not too long ago, my mom would come in and tell the mediator, a third party, Anthony, my son, he is violent. Wow. Well, guess what? That constitutes slander, doesn't it? Oh, no, he's violent. Well, first of all, it's not true. Now, let's talk about truth or falsity of a statement in connection with defamation. Now, it's a standard of old law that truth is not a defense to defamation. That is, even if the thing you said was true, just because you gossiped about it, that's the wrong already. It doesn't matter that it's true. It only matters whether or not it was hurtful. Okay? Is it hurtful to tell my friend Anthony that I'm violent? Well, yes and no. In some sense, as a standalone issue, if it's a falsehood, it stands to be corrected. So what did I do? I simply said to Anthony, no, that's not true. I didn't do anything that could reasonably be construed as violent. So Anthony does what? He checks again with Barbara directly on his own, and then later when we all sit together for our first meeting, furthermore, there's an opportunity to raise the issue. Barbara falls silent. Nothing came out to contradict my denial of the claim that there's violence, and eventually it became settled. Anthony said, yeah, or otherwise appeared to come to the conclusion, as far as I could tell, that yeah, it really does seem that nothing you did could reasonably be called violent. Therefore, the claim of such violence is inaccurate. See that? Now, when Barbara makes a claim that the counterparty is violent, what is that counterparty entitled to do? Can they make a special complaint and say, what? My mom said that I'm violent? It's not true, therefore I won't speak to her about any of these things. Well, no, that'd be going an extra step too far. The person who said it originally was her. She would think naturally, what? So I said what I believe. I said that my truth to litigate, to test the truth of it in the debate. So I'm just throwing it out there. You shouldn't, because it's wrong. But you get to, and then I get to correct you and stop you after you say the wrong thing. See the order? It's not the case that Barbara gets to say it, and then I get to say, no, everything has to stop. We can't sit together ever because she said I'm violent. No. She would say, no, I said that. That's exactly why you should come and sit down and explain whether or not you were and why we think we were and weren't and all that. Oh, you see? Right. So if I call my mom a narcissist, it's the same thing. It's an assessment of one's underlying nature, and is it harmful or not harmful? Well, no. If you have the right to deny it, you do, but you don't get to stop the proceedings because it was said. Is the same mirror situation as when you falsely asserted that someone is violent, except in my case, it's not unreasonable to call my mother a narcissist. However, it was found that it was unreasonable to attribute violence to me, for I didn't do anything that would be considered violent in the traditional or reasonable sense of the definition of the word. See that? So slowly through the debate, it becomes evinced and clear with clarity who's really speaking correctly and who's not speaking correctly. But remember, the tendency of anyone who seeks to block the truth will always try to do things that make it harder to uncover the truth. The person who's in the real right will always try to expose more, show more, and go more into uncovering mode. While the person who is wrong, their instinct will be to try to hide things, halt things, stop things from happening, and disconnect. I'm trying to bring things more forced together. She's trying to bring things more forced apart. So that already tells you by instinct. Judges look at these things, evaluators, mediators look at these things too, to determine who appears to be right and wrong. Very clear. Very clear.